The letter arrived on a Tuesday, stained with coffee and trembling in my hands, as if it knew the weight of its words. My father was gone. Heart attack, sudden, no warning, and with him, the fragile tether to the life I'd known. At 24, I was an orphan in every way that mattered, standing in my cramped Boston apartment, staring at an address in Vermont I'd never heard of. I'm Elias, an artist who'd rather sketch shadows than face them. My father, Daniel, was a quiet man, a carpenter who spoke more with his hands than his voice. He raised me alone after my mother, Vivian, left when I was 6, her perfume lingering longer than her love. I hadn't seen her in years, hadn't wanted to. But the letter wasn't from her. It was from Caleb, my half-brother, a man I'd never met, inviting me to live with him in our father's old house. "There's space," he wrote, "and I think Dad would have wanted this." I didn't know what to feel, grief, curiosity, or dread, but I packed a bag and went. The bus ride to Maplewood, Vermont, was a blur of crimson forests and fleeting towns. I sketched the passengers to calm my nerves. An old woman knitting, a kid with earbuds, the driver's tired eyes in the rear view. When I stepped off at dusk, Caleb was there, leaning against a beat-up pickup, his flannel shirt rolled to his elbows. He was 28, taller than I'd imagined, with a mechanic's hands and a smile that didn't quite reach his blue eyes. "Elias?" he said, voice low, like he was testing the word. I nodded, and we stood there, two strangers bound by a dead man's blood. The house was a relic, all creaking floors and peeling paint, nestled at the edge of town. Caleb showed me to a spare room upstairs, its walls bare except for a faded photo of Dad, younger, laughing with a woman I barely recognized as my mother. "This was his place," Caleb said, lingering in the doorway. "I moved in a few years back when he got sick. Never thought I'd be the one staying." His voice held a quiet ache, and I wondered what kind of man my father had been to him, a father I'd never shared. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The house groaned like it was alive, and my mind churned with questions. Why had Dad never mentioned Caleb? Why had Vivian left me, but kept him? I wandered downstairs, finding Caleb in the kitchen, nursing a beer. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, sliding a bottle toward me. I shook my head but sat anyway, the silence between us heavy but not unkind. He told me about his life, fixing cars, hiking the Green Mountains, avoiding the town's gossip. I told him about my sketches, my part-time barista gig, my fear of being alone. It was the first time I'd admitted that out loud. The next morning, I found a box in the attic labeled Vivian. Inside were letters, photos, and a journal, her journal. My hands shook as I opened it, the words slicing through me like glass. She wrote about Caleb with a warmth I'd never known. My boy, my heart, the one I'll always choose. Page after page, she gushed about his first steps, his laughter, his dreams. About me? Barely a mention, just a cold note. Elias is Daniel's burden, not mine. I felt my chest tighten, the old wound of her abandonment splitting open. She'd chosen Caleb, loved him, while I was nothing but a regret. I confronted Caleb that evening, the journal clutched in my hand. "Did you know?" I demanded, my voice raw. "Did you know she loved you and left me to rot?" His face fell, and for the first time, I saw guilt in his eyes. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "She was complicated. She'd visit me sometimes, but she never talked about you. I thought you were better off with Dad." His honesty stung, but it wasn't cruel. It was just the truth. We sat on the porch, the autumn air sharp with the scent of pine. Caleb told me about Vivian's visits, sporadic, fleeting, always laced with promises she didn't keep. He'd grown up in foster homes until Dad took him in, but Vivian's favoritism had left its mark on him too, a different kind of scar. "She didn't love me the way you think," he said, staring at the stars. "She loved the idea of me, but she was never really there. I wanted to hate him, but I couldn't. He was as broken as I was, just in a different way." Days turned into weeks, and we fell into a rhythm. Cooking meals, fixing the house, sharing stories. I sketched him once, his profile sharp against the morning light, and he teased me for making him look too pretty. There was a warmth in his laugh, a steadiness that anchored me. But the journal haunted me, its pages a reminder of my mother's betrayal. I started noticing things, how Caleb's room had framed photos of him and Vivian, how Dad's old letters praised Caleb's strength but barely mentioned me. The favoritism wasn't just hers. It was woven into the house, into the life I'd never been part of. One night, after too many beers, I kissed him. It was impulsive, reckless, born from the ache of wanting to be seen. He froze, then pulled back, his eyes wide with shock. "Elias, we can't," he whispered, but his hand lingered on my arm, warm and unsure. I fled to my room, mortified, the journal's words echoing, "You're not enough." The next morning, he acted like it never happened, but the air between us shifted, charged with something neither of us could name. By the end of the first month, I was unraveling. The house, the journal, Caleb's quiet kindness. It was too much. I wanted to leave, to run from the pain of my mother's rejection and the confusion of my feelings for Caleb. But then I found another letter in the attic, tucked inside Dad's old toolbox. It was from him, addressed to both of us, written just before he died. Elias, Caleb, it began, "You're my boys, my legacy. I failed you both in different ways, but you're stronger together. Forgive her. Forgive me." Tears blurred my vision, and I realized I wasn't just grieving Dad, I was grieving the family I'd never had. I showed Caleb the letter that night. He read it in silence, his jaw tight, then looked at me with something new in his eyes. Hope? Maybe, or understanding. "We're not them," he said, his voice steady. "We don't have to carry their mistakes." For the first time, I believed him. We weren't just half-brothers bound by loss. We were two souls choosing each other, step by shaky step. The weeks that followed were a fragile dance. Caleb and I tiptoed around the kiss, neither of us brave enough to name the tension that hummed between us. I threw myself into sketching, filling pages with the angles of his hands, the curve of his jaw, the way his eyes softened when he thought I wasn't looking. The house, once a tomb of secrets, began to feel like a canvas, imperfect but ours. Maplewood was small, the kind of town where everyone knew your business. At the diner where I picked up a part-time job, locals whispered about the new guy living with Caleb. I ignored them, but their stares reminded me of the journal's cold words. I started painting the house's exterior to keep busy, and Caleb joined me, his laughter breaking the silence as we splattered each other with white paint. "You're terrible at this," he teased, wiping a streak from my cheek. His touch lingered, and I felt my heart stutter, caught between fear and want. Vivian's journal became my obsession. I read it late at night, searching for answers. One entry stopped me cold. "Caleb's my redemption, the one I got right. Elias was a mistake I couldn't fix." The words burned, but I kept reading, desperate to understand why she'd chosen him over me. I found sketches she'd drawn, crude but tender, of Caleb as a boy, his smile wide and trusting. There were none of me. I slammed the journal shut, my chest tight with rage and grief. One rainy afternoon, I found Caleb in the garage, tinkering with an old motorcycle. "Why didn't you tell me she visited you?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. He set down his wrench, his face guarded. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said. "She'd show up, bring me books or clothes, then disappear for months. It wasn't love, Elias. It was guilt." I wanted to scream, to demand why he got even that much of her, but his eyes held the same pain I felt. We were both her victims, just in different ways. The town's autumn festival arrived, a blur of cider stalls and fairy lights. Caleb convinced me to go, saying I needed to stop hiding. We wandered through the crowd, sharing a caramel apple, our shoulders brushing. A local band played, and when they struck up a slow song, Caleb grabbed my hand, pulling me into a clumsy dance. "You're awful at this too," he grinned, but his grip was firm, grounding. For a moment, I forgot the journal, the pain, the world. It was just us swaying under the stars. But the past wouldn't stay buried. At the festival, an older woman approached us, her eyes sharp. "You're Vivian's boys," she said, not a question. She always talked about Caleb, never mentioned another son. My stomach twisted, and Caleb's hand tightened on mine. "She was wrong," he said firmly, and I realized he was defending me, not her. We left the festival early, the weight of her words lingering. Back home, I found another of Dad's letters in the attic, this one addressed to Vivian. "You broke Elias's heart," he wrote. "You broke mine too, but I'll never let you break Caleb's." It was a punch to the gut. Dad had known about her favoritism and still kept Caleb close, maybe to protect him, maybe to make up for her absence. I showed it to Caleb, and he sat on the floor, head in his hands. "I didn't know he saw it that way," he whispered. "I thought I was the one he didn't want." We started opening up more, sharing pieces of our fractured pasts. Caleb told me about his foster years, the loneliness of being Vivian's kid in a system that didn't care. I told him about the nights I'd wait for her to come back, drawing pictures to show her I was worth loving. Our stories wove together, painful but healing like stitching a wound. I kissed him again one night, softer this time, and he didn't pull away. Instead, he kissed me back, tentative but real, and I felt something shift, a spark of something neither of us could ignore. By late October, the house felt less like a ghost and more like a home. We fixed the leaky roof, laughed over burnt dinners, and started a garden in the backyard, planting bulbs that wouldn't bloom until spring. But Vivian's journal still gnawed at me. I found a final entry, dated a year before Dad's death. "I saw Elias in Boston. He's grown, but he's still Daniel's, not mine. Caleb's the one who needs me. She'd seen me and chosen to stay away. The betrayal cut deeper than ever, but Caleb's voice broke through my spiral. You're not her mistake, he said, pulling me close. You're enough. Winter crept into Maplewood, dusting the town with snow and sealing us inside the house's warm walls. Caleb and I were something undefined, a mix of brothers, friends, and something more, our connection growing in quiet moments. His hand on my shoulder, my sketches of him piling up. But Vivian's shadow loomed, her journal a poison I couldn't shake. I started dreaming of her, her cold eyes dismissing me, and woke up, gasping, Caleb's steady breathing beside me the only anchor. The town wasn't kind to us. Rumors spread about the strange brothers living together, about our mother's scandalous past. At the diner, a regular named Hank sneered, "You two are awfully close for family." I froze, but Caleb just laughed, loud and defiant. "Mind your own business, Hank," he said, and I admired his courage, even as my own faltered. I wasn't out, not really, and the idea of defining what we were terrified me. I found work at a local art gallery, a small space run by a woman named Mara who saw potential in my sketches. She encouraged me to display them, but I hesitated. Most were of Caleb, raw and intimate. "They're beautiful," she said, studying one of him fixing the motorcycle, his face lit with focus. "There's love in these lines." Her words hit hard. Love. Was that what this was? I didn't know, but I felt it in every glance, every touch. One night, a snowstorm trapped us inside. Caleb built a fire, and we sat on the floor, sharing a blanket. "What are we doing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at me, his eyes searching. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I don't want to stop." We kissed again, slower, deeper, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was chasing something I couldn't have. But the journal's words crept in. Elias is Daniel's burden. I pulled away, doubt gnawing at me. The next day, I found a box of Dad's old things in the basement, tools, photos, and a letter to Caleb, written when he was a teenager. "You're my son," it read, "no matter what Vivian says. Elias needs you too, even if he doesn't know it yet." I sat there, crying, realizing Dad had wanted us to find each other. He'd known Vivian's favoritism had broken us both, and this house, this life, was his attempt to mend it. I showed Caleb the letter, and he broke down, something rare for him. "I thought he took me in out of pity," he said, voice cracking. I didn't know he saw us as equals. We held each other, the fire crackling, and I felt the weight of our parents' mistakes lift just a little. We weren't just their sons. We were our own story, messy but real. The gallery hosted a small show for local artists, and Mara convinced me to submit my work. I chose a portrait of Caleb, his eyes bright against a backdrop of autumn leaves. At the opening, the town showed up, and I braced for judgment. Instead, people lingered on the painting, whispering about its emotion, its truth. Caleb stood beside me, his hand brushing mine, and I felt proud, not just of the art, but of us. But Vivian's ghost wasn't done. A lawyer called, saying she'd left a will, naming Caleb as her sole heir. She died quietly in a hospital in Maine, and I hadn't even known. The news hit like a slap. She'd chosen him, even in death. I spiraled, retreating to my room, the journal open to her final entry. Caleb found me, his face pale. "I don't want her money," he said. "It's not worth losing you." His words stopped me cold. Losing me? I hadn't realized how much I mattered to him. We burned the journal that night, page by page, in the backyard. The flames ate her words, her favoritism, her lies. "She doesn't get to define us," Caleb said, his hand in mine. I nodded, tears falling, and for the first time, I felt free, not from her but from the need to be enough for her. Spring arrived, melting the snow and coaxing green from the garden we planted. Caleb and I were closer now, our bond a quiet rebellion against the past. We didn't label it boyfriends, partners, something else, but it was real, carved in shared glances and late-night talks. The house felt alive, its walls echoing our laughter instead of our grief. But the town's whispers grew louder. At the diner, a group of regulars stopped talking when I walked in, their eyes cold. Mara warned me about a petition circulating to protect Maplewood's values, aimed at us. "They don't understand," she said, squeezing my hand. "But you've got allies here." I wanted to believe her, but fear crept in. I'd spent my life hiding, and now, with Caleb, I was exposed. One evening, a brick crashed through our window, shattering glass across the living room. A note was tied to it. "Freaks don't belong here." Caleb's face hardened, but I saw the hurt in his eyes. We called the police, but they brushed it off as a prank. "Small towns," the officer said with a shrug. I wanted to run, but Caleb stood firm. "This is our home," he said. We're not leaving. We started attending town meetings, speaking up about acceptance, about love. Some listened, Mara, the librarian, a few younger folks, but others turned away. Caleb's courage inspired me, and I painted more, pouring my fear and hope into canvases. The gallery displayed them, and slowly, people started talking, not just about us, but about change. Vivian's will kept haunting us. The lawyer sent documents, detailing her estate, a house in Maine, some savings, all for Caleb. I told him to take it, to start fresh, but he refused. It's blood money, he said. I'd rather build something with you. We decided to donate it to a local LGBTQ+ youth center, a small act of defiance against her legacy. One night, we found a photo of Dad and Vivian, young and smiling, before everything fell apart. It was tucked in a book of poetry with a note in Dad's handwriting. For my boys, when you're ready. We sat on the porch, reading the poems aloud, our voices blending with the crickets. I realized Dad had loved us both in his quiet way, and had hoped we'd find each other. Our relationship deepened, no longer just a spark but a flame. We kissed in the kitchen, laughed in the garden, made love under the stars. It wasn't perfect, doubt still lingered, and the town's judgment stung, but it was ours. I painted a mural on the house, a swirl of colors showing two figures hand in hand, a testament to our survival. By summer, the petition fizzled out, and the youth center opened, named after Dad. At the opening, Caleb spoke, his voice steady, about family, forgiveness, and love. I stood beside him, my heart full, knowing we'd built something stronger than Vivian's cruelty or the town's fear. The youth center became our sanctuary, a place where we could be ourselves without apology. Kids came, teens with scared eyes, young adults with stories like ours, and we listened, helped, loved. Caleb taught them how to fix bikes, and I led art workshops, watching their pain turn into color and shape. The town didn't change overnight, but the center was a start, a crack in the wall of prejudice. My art took off, with Mara pushing me to submit to bigger galleries. A Boston curator saw my work and offered a solo show. I was terrified, but said yes, painting feverishly, portraits of Caleb, of us, of the house that had become our home. Each stroke was a release, a way to let go of Vivian's shadow. Caleb framed them himself, his hands steady as he hung them in the gallery. The night of the show, Maplewood showed up, some to support, others to gawk. Hank was there, his face sour, but he stayed, staring at a painting of Caleb and me dancing at the festival. Didn't know you could make something like that, he muttered before leaving. It wasn't approval, but it was something. Caleb squeezed my hand, whispering, "You're unstoppable." I believed him. Vivian's absence still stung, but I stopped seeking her in the journal's ashes. Instead, I found her in myself, in the way I loved, fiercely and without reservation. Caleb and I talked about the future, a trip to the coast, maybe a dog, a life built on our terms. We weren't just healing, we were growing. One afternoon, a kid at the center, Jamie, asked how we'd survive the hate. I looked at Caleb, his smile soft, and said, "We chose each other." It was the truth, simple and profound. Vivian had tried to divide us, but we'd built a bridge instead, one painted with courage and love. The summer ended with a picnic at the center, kids laughing, music playing, Caleb grilling burgers. I sketched the scene, my heart light. We weren't perfect, and the town wasn't either, but we were here, together, and that was enough. Fall returned, marking a year since I'd arrived in Maplewood. The house was brighter now, its walls repainted, its garden blooming. Caleb and I were a unit. Our love no longer questioned, but a fact, solid as the oak in a yard. The town still whispered, but the voices were quieter, drowned out by the community we'd built at the center. My Boston show sold out, and I used the money to fund scholarships for the center's kids. Caleb started a mentorship program, teaching mechanics to teens who needed a purpose. We were making a difference, not just for them, but for ourselves, proving we were more than our parents' mistakes. One night, a storm hit, rattling the house. We lay in bed, listening to the rain, and Caleb said, "I'm glad you came here." His voice was soft, vulnerable, and I kissed him, feeling the weight of our journey. We'd faced Vivian's cruelty, the town's hate, our own fears, and come out stronger. I started a new painting, a self-portrait with Caleb, our faces lit by hope. It wasn't just for us, it was for Dad, for the kids at the center, for anyone who'd ever felt unloved. The brush moved like it had a mind of its own, and when I finished, Caleb hung it in the living room, a reminder of who we'd become. The town elected a new mayor, a woman who'd visited the center and seen its impact. She invited us to speak at a council meeting, and we did, hand in hand, telling our story. Some faces softened, others didn't, but we kept going. Change was slow, but it was real. 2 years after Dad's death, Maplewood felt like home. The youth center thrived, a beacon for kids who needed it. Caleb and I were engaged, our love a quiet revolution against the past. We didn't need Vivian's approval or the town's. We had each other. At the center's anniversary, we unveiled a mural I'd painted. 2 figures under a sky of stars, surrounded by faces of the kids we'd helped. The crowd cheered, and Caleb pulled me close, whispering, "This is our legacy." I thought of Dad's letter, his hope for us, and knew we'd fulfilled it. Vivian's favoritism had broken us, but we'd rebuilt ourselves, piece by piece. We weren't just brothers or lovers. We were partners, artists, survivors. The house, once a cage of secrets, was now a home, filled with laughter, art, and love. As we stood under the stars, I realized the true meaning of our story. Family isn't just blood. It's the people you choose, the ones who see you, scars and all, and stay. Caleb squeezed my hand, and I smiled, knowing we'd chosen well.